Indiana football is starting to gain traction in recruiting and the portal too. How far can the Hoosiers go?
Locked On presents The Portal, the daily podcast covering college football recruiting and everything NIL. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into the portal. This is your first listen each and every day. Thank you very much for stopping in. I am Brian Smith, your host, longtime recruiting analyst and college football writer. And today's show is going to feature the Hoosiers. They're making a big move in the college football world. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head over to FanDuel.com to get started. And today's guest is none other than Jacob Goins, Locked On Hoosiers host. And man, I grew up in Indiana. They never had an 11-win season. I can assure you of that. I don't need to look up the records. So first off, just before we jump into the recruiting, they got a commitment we got to talk about, et cetera. They're first for the class of 26. When Indiana started winning this past season, Jacob, when did you realize, okay, this team's really got a chance to maybe go to a major bowl or something else? When did you know?
It's funny because I've been asked that a couple of times in different ways, and I've answered it a couple of different times. But I think the best scenario was when the third game of the year, when Indiana goes on the road to UCLA. Not that UCLA was anything good. They obviously were just an average team in the Big Ten. The Rose Bowl is not what it used to be. We get that. But this was a game, you know this was a game Indiana never wins. You're going on the road across the country. First time you're playing them in conference play. It was just a recipe for Indiana to lose in their entire history of existence. And they go and get it done. And it's like, oh, all right, cool. That's all right. Then you play Maryland and you handle that game. And it's like, oh, maybe we are legit. Maybe we do. And then you just start beating teams like Washington and Michigan State, and you do it handily. And it was like, oh my God, we're actually really good. And they weren't just getting lucky. They weren't playing really bad teams. They were doing things the right way, dropping 60 offensively. They weren't giving up more than 10 or 12 points a game, one of the best defenses in the college football this season. So it was the UCLA game to start. And then you started handling business throughout Big Ten play. And after every week, it was just another impressive performance after impressive performance. And it really just built throughout the year.
It's ironic because when they won the UCLA game, I still remember seeing that like go across the screen. I was like, oh, okay, UCLA must be terrible. That was my first reaction.
As most people said, yes.
But then they won a game or two more, and I'm like,
yep,
Indiana must be decent. And I started watching them some because they're original. Let's call it like it is. Indiana was relegated to the Big Ten Network, etc. They get and all of a sudden, they're getting different time. You know what I mean? It was like a different deal because, oh, wait a minute. They're going to go to they might go to a good networks notice. Well, more importantly, the advertisers notice, and they're the ones that dictate, let's be honest.
It's all about the money.
Yeah. Yes, sir. And then they were fun to watch.
Yeah.
Because they're fun to watch, because they were winning, it has also helped them in recruiting. And we'll talk about the 26 class. When I first messaged you, I thought that's what we were going to talk about, but the 25 class, we got to get to that as well. I didn't know they had a commitment, and like the last second, I need to scout this kid. Sam Simpson commits. These junior days happen and all this stuff. Look, again, I grew up in Indiana. When an offensive lineman from Wisconsin visits, I'm like, yeah, right. He's going to go play for the Badgers. Right. And I looked it up to make sure. He has an offer from Wisconsin, visits Indiana, and almost immediately commits.
Yeah.
What does that tell you about the Indiana football program?
Yeah, not only did he have offers from Wisconsin, it was other Big Ten schools like Illinois and Iowa, even out of the Big 12 at Iowa State. I mean, Power 4 legitimate programs that are feeding grounds for offensive linemen who have put dozens of them into the NFL for guys that play on Sundays. And so for Indiana to not only get those types of guys on campus, and I know it's a 3-star offensive lineman, some people may not be jumping up and down, but you should, because of the bigger picture, as you're mentioning, the fact that Indiana can go out of state, get offensive linemen who, as you mentioned, are just born to play at the likes of Wisconsin and Iowa, places like that. Indiana said, no, we want a shot. We want an opportunity. He came to campus. He was offered on Friday, and then he commits just a couple of days later. I mean, it really shows that this program is aggressive. They know what they're talking about, and they're making good impressions. His comments were incredible. He said, I just appreciate the attention that they gave me. Even while they're working in the portal to get offensive linemen, they still paid attention to me. They told me they liked my speed and my lateral movement and my grades. He had such good things to say. It tells me, Brian, that this coaching staff knows what they're doing. They're experienced and they're saying the right things, because Indiana is now a destination place for kids to want to go.
I've never heard that stated publicly, but this is at least the tip of the iceberg for it. Again, to your point, he's a 3-star kid, but just the brief scouting of Simpson, you're talking about a kid from River Falls, Wisconsin. Again, it doesn't get more Badger territory than that.
Literally, yeah.
And I'm watching his film. Great sign. He's playing mostly defensive line on his high school film. Defensive players are more athletic as a rule. Let's not kid ourselves. The last stop on the bus stop is the O-line. It is what it is. But if you get athletic guys and move them to O-line, this is how you win. Back in the day when I was growing up, this is what Miami did. This is what Florida State did, etc. Yeah. There's a reason they had success. So I'm really curious about how much they can do. And they got a big junior day going on. A kid that I'm curious about. This is so important, like for their class of 26. Dominic Berry's on campus this weekend from Center Grove. He's a running back / tight end. Like, he's an all-around athlete, 6'4", 225 kid. If you start getting those kinds of players, and I'm going to ask this again in a different way later in the show, but do you think fans are just going to start following Indiana football year round? Like, it's interesting to me, because when I was a kid, like, you didn't pay any attention to Indiana football recruiting.
Yeah, I mean, they are right now. They are right now. I mean, for Locked On Hoosiers, go look at our numbers. They care about football. They want to know who's coming in the portal, who's here for junior day, who's going to commit, who can we flip, who are we offering, who, you know what I mean? Like, they're asking, the fans are begging for these questions and answers. And right now, Curt Cignetti and Indiana are giving it to them, and that's why they're so excited. So, no, they're more bought in right now to football, possibly, than they've ever been before. Winning helps that, yes. But now that you're starting to win off the field too, Hoosier fans are fired up for the football season.
What do you think it would take for some of the Indiana fans to go all in? And, like, I mean, Memorial Stadium, until this past season, it never was full.
No.
Unless Ohio State came or Michigan came, and they
because their fans came in and helped fill the place up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do you think a lot of people, I don't think Indiana basketball is ever going to completely change. Again, we'll get into this a little more, but, like, they're always going to be supportive. But do you think some people have just kind of turned off the interest in the recruiting and all that? Because it used to be Indiana basketball recruiting. You walked into a grocery store, a restaurant, especially like a breakfast restaurant with the old guys. They're talking about Indiana basketball recruiting in May.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Is it to that extent, like football is just that locked in now?
I don't think it's to that extent yet, but I think Curt Cignetti is trying to get it there. And I think fans are happier to talk about football because, let's be real, there's a whole lot more success even off the field with football recruiting than there is basketball recruiting. Indiana basketball just had a one-player class again. And you're losing out on all the biggest guys to the likes of Duke and UConn and North Carolina and Purdue. Like, all the big programs that are still winning right now are getting those big players on basketball. And so Indiana keeps getting left out in the cold. And, man, we're tired of seeing that. Fans are over it, and the head coach has a lot to do with that. But on the football side, they can't get enough of recruiting news and information and just good things happening for football in terms of recruiting and the transfer portal.
On that note, when we come back, we're going to talk about the portal. We're going to talk about a key addition they just recently got from Notre Dame. And we're also going to talk about the 2025 class. That is next here on the portal. This message is from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes are waiting and wondering and worrying if you're going to get any money. and then waiting, wondering, and worrying a little bit more. Now taxes, they're all about matching with TurboTax Expert, who can help your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes the undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on the progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find every deduction, will file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, and no worries. Now, this is taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. 2026 recruiting, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, it's something that's interesting with Indiana football because they got another big junior day, and I was looking at the list. But it's before we really dive into that, I was looking at the signatures for the 25 class, and it kind of goes back to the junior day. There's a consistency theme here that's IU fans are going to be happy about. Chicago, Indianapolis, Northern Ohio, Cincinnati, Atlanta, the state of North Carolina, 757, like Norfolk in that area, it's super talented. Mm-hmm. Indiana is dipping into the hotbeds with recruiting. Now, for those that don't know, and I'm assuming the vast majority do, Cignetti has history with this guy. You might have heard of him, Nick Saban. That probably helps because Nick is one of the biggest recruiting nuts that I've ever seen, and I am about as big as one as you can get. I think that Indiana, with their wins, it's one thing to have the connections there, Jacob, because anybody can walk into a high school. The head coach at that school will let you come in. The kid will come down to the office, shake your hand. But it used to be when Indiana came, they're like, well, when's Ohio State getting here? You know what I mean? It was just like, now you at least have a chance. Again, Simpson just committed to Indiana. He's from River Falls, Wisconsin, and he did have a Badgers offer. Talk a little bit about when you started to see the commitments roll in. I'm sure there were a few, especially closer to signing day, whether it was portal and all that stuff, you're starting to hear things. But when did you know that recruiting had changed for Indiana a little bit too?
Well, I mean, it came with the wins, obviously, but I think it came with the hiring of Curt Cignetti because you mentioned it. This guy's been coaching a long time and he's won everywhere he's been. And he's made connections as an assistant coach and as he went through the ranks and as a head coach, even at James Madison, he had connections everywhere. And it shows in Indiana's 2025 recruiting class. You had 11 states represented in that class, including, yes, Indiana, but you mentioned it. You go to Ohio, you go to Illinois, Florida, Georgia, like you go and get so many great players out of all these states, and you're just laying down the groundwork and foundation that Indiana had to pretty much start from scratch, that Curt Cignetti had to start from scratch, because like you said, nobody took Indiana recruiting seriously, not on the football side of things. Nobody cared if Indiana showed up. Most of the people didn't even know who Indiana's head football coach was when he showed up. Now you do. And Curt Cignetti, even and I say this in the utmost respect, even in his older age, he is still able to connect to these kids, and his assistants are doing a fantastic job of doing that same thing in an era where connections mean more than ever before with these kids. They're saying what they need to say. And I think it was with the hire of Cignetti, who already had a lot of those. And he said, all right, we've got to get in talent right now. And they did it a lot of it from James Madison, yes, but they hit the portal hard and they went and got anybody they could, got good ones, as we just saw with an 11-win season. And now it's almost it's an overflow effect where Indiana is in the headlines. People know the logo. They recognize the brand. They know who Curt Cignetti is. And players now want to see what's happening. You start turning your head and looking. It's like, wait, what is going on in Bloomington? Why are they winning games all of a sudden? How did they make it to the college football playoff? And now also, Brian, the fact that Indiana is investing money into the football program again, that is a huge part of it, because I don't think people, just the average fan, I don't think they understand just how much facilities and the building you play in and the things that you have at your disposal, how much that really means to a high school kid coming into the college ranks. And so Indiana investing money too, because Curt Cignetti demanded it. That's when it started. Day one, when he was hired here, and you see how it's working so far.
Well, for those that don't know, Indiana's weight room like 15, 20 years ago, I forget what year it was when they redid it, it was the biggest weight room in college football at one point. I'm like, this is so weird because they're still not very good. They were starting to put money in. They got NIL money and they've got booster money there. A lot of people don't know about that, aren't in the Hoosier faithful. To that point, they're still continuing to build. Just because Cignetti asked doesn't mean they had to say yes.
That's true.
So, props, they did it, and now it's paying off. Here are a few of the schools. If you're a recruiting nut, this will mean something to you. St. Francis in Baltimore, top 5 program nationally over the last decade, and also Grayson High School just outside of Atlanta. Those are 2 of the places they got kids from this past year. This is an example. Riverside High School in Jacksonville, etc. They're hitting high schools that Florida State goes to, Georgia goes to, Auburn goes to, and getting players. I'm not saying they're always the elite guy, but now that they've got their foot in the door after making the playoff, I'm really curious to see what they're going to be able to do, because now that Pandora's box is open, who's to say they can't start getting some of these top 25 kids out of any given state? Like, you get a top 25 player at Georgia, he's good. Okay.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's really good. And now they're also like, they're still dipping into Ohio. They always did, but they always got like the low 3-star guy. Ohio State doesn't recruit as much. And they're going to start getting some of these kids. What is it that you have for an expectation for Indiana recruiting class-wise? Should they be top 25 moving forward for high school? Or, and I guess part of it is how much of it are they going to use on NIL towards the high school? What do you think towards portal? However you want to answer that.
Yeah, and that's so funny because that's what all of these coaches are trying to figure out, is how much value do we put in high school recruiting versus transfer portal? How much money do we put in high school versus transfer portal? I think for Indiana, if you just keep consistently getting better, right? Stacking and I think that's for anybody, but stacking those recruiting classes, get a top 25, then flirt for top 15, then start fighting for top 10. It may take a little bit, even if Indiana does start winning or keep winning games, I should say, because those other places are still really good. Ohio State still puts guys in the league every year. Michigan does. I mean, just talking teams in the Big Ten. But that's one thing I think Indiana has going for them that not many people think they have going for them, is they're developing these players. And I think they're going to be really good at that next level. That's a huge part of it too, right? There's so many kids that want to go and just get their quick buck, play, transfer, do whatever. But there's a lot of them that still want to get to college, get better, and then get to the next level as well. So if Indiana can start stacking top 20, top 25 recruiting classes, that will be enough to compete in today's era of college football, with an expanded college football playoff, with your facilities being upgraded, and a coach that's got an 8-year contract extension this year. Like, if Indiana can keep doing those things, you will be successful. Then you start getting that 1 5-star in the class, and then you get another 5-star and a bunch of 4-stars. You go from 0, 1, 2, and 3s to now 3s, 4s, and 5s. That's the jump. That's the difference. You know that, from mediocre Power 4 football to championship level Power 4 football. So if Indiana can start doing that, I think you're going to have a lot of good years to come.
To that point, you're saying the X's and O's are not as important as the Jimmies and the Joes, and that has never really not been the case, but it's more fun to talk about it when it's working in your favor.
Sure.
To that point, we're going to talk about what I consider to be one of the biggest portal additions for any program here next on the portal. And we're going to talk about a guy that's got 2 years starting experience at Notre Dame, headed to Indiana. Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to use. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's the icing on the cake. Download the app or head over to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. All right, Pat Coogan is now a member of the Indiana Hoosiers. For those that don't know, it's ironic. The last time Indiana played, he was one of the guys causing them problems because he was the starting center for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. He was a 2-year starter for them. And I've got a couple of notes on him from the last 2 seasons. In 2023, 769 snaps, and this past year, 813. 23, he played left guard, and he had a 66 overall grade. This year, he played center from game 3 on and had a 72.1 grade. Here's the biggest note, though. Centers are often talked about like inside guys play. They're not as tall, they're not as long. They struggle with pass protection. He was really good in pass pro this year. He went from 64.7 on PFF to 79 overall. And then against Ohio State, he had an 80.4 pass blocking grade in the national title game. This just in, Ohio State has really good defensive linemen. Indiana got a stud, and it just kind of puts the cherry on top of for what we were talking about. Indiana's now, like a year ago, 0 chance Pat Coogan visits Indiana, let alone signs with Indiana. I am steadfast in that. What does Jacob Goins say?
At 100% agreement. And it shows that this is not a fluke. It shows that this is not just oh, that was cute for a year, Indiana, but go back to being bad and worrying about basketball. No, Indiana's not going anywhere. And you start getting transfer offensive linemen from Notre Dame, Ohio State, other Big Ten programs like we've done in this portal class, and you get a Power 4 quarterback that'll start for you this year. You go and get a Power 4 tight end. You go and get Power 4 defensive front guys and secondary. I mean, Indiana's not pulling guys from Akron anymore, Brian. And I say that with respect. You're not winning recruiting battles with the Zips. You're winning recruiting battles with the Wolverines and the Hawkeyes and the Buckeyes. And that, I don't think people can truly wrap their head around it. It's still mind-blowing for guys like you and me who love Indiana. I mean, it's still weird, and it still doesn't seem true at times. But you get a guy like Pat Coogan, who's 6'5", 310 pounds, who is going to be a starter for you day one. And the Hoosiers, as of this recording, are going after the other one too, Spindler from Notre Dame, who has yet to go anywhere as of now. So you have a chance to get 2 starting linemen off a national championship game team, and they walk in and start immediately in Indiana. Like, it's truly unbelievable. Who, by the way, that Notre Dame team had a 1,000-yard rusher, a 900-yard rusher, and a 700-yard rusher on the same team. And Indiana likes to run the football first. So you're bringing in talent that is competitive with everybody else around you. Rather than just getting whipped up front like Indiana did against Ohio State, Notre Dame, you're going to get those exact players to try to make up for that. It's truly incredible to watch.
It really is. And I think when I saw Coogan pick Indiana, this, again, maybe it's just me from where I grew up and everything, but when I saw his list and I was following his recruitment and I saw the teams involved, I didn't think he was going to Indiana. And I'm guessing you probably didn't either. But I don't know. It's just like his list. I mean, he could have went a bunch of places. So
well, what's so cool about him too is he was another example, Brian, of a guy that came on a visit and Cignetti didn't let him leave. He did not let him go without getting a pen to paper. And he was supposed to take a trip, I think, to Michigan the weekend.
That was the school that I thought he was going to go to.
And he was supposed to take that visit, and he canceled it. He said, I'm good. Don't need it. I'm an Indiana Hoosier. Cignetti did not let him walk out the door. That's another example of whatever they're selling inside those walls at the football facility, it's working because kids are liking it, they're buying it, and they're committing to it. And that's never happened here. Not like this, not to this level. And it really is, again, you're not getting just the bottom feeders of the portal or recruiting. You're getting dudes. I mean, Coogan is one of the highest rated portal players in this class, in this cycle, if you will. He's the second highest recruit in the portal cycle for Indiana. This dude's legit. And Curt Cignetti just continues to hit home runs in the portal. And again, whatever they're saying, it's working.
Well, they got Devin Boykin, the safety out of NC State. They got Rylan Gandy, corner out of Pitt. They got Tyler Morris, speaking of the University of Michigan, wide receiver who, unfortunately for him, played for one of the worst passing teams I think I've ever seen in the major Power Four.
Terrible.
It's so wild because Michigan's had so many good quarterbacks. Thank you, Tom Brady. But I saw him play live. It's amazing how much better he got over his career. But they also got Fernando Mendoza, a kid that I know and a kid that I've seen play live at the high school, college level. First off, my own report. This is what Indiana fans need to know. I saw him in the Cal at Auburn game, and I'm assuming you watched that just like I did. You live here too. He annihilated them on third down.
Terrible.
It was like at one point it was either 7 out of 8 or 8 out of 9 on third down. It was insane, their conversion rate. No offense to Cal. They've got a couple of really good skill players. But up front, their offensive line stinks. They stink. He was running for his life and still putting the ball on the money. Bottom line, Fernando Mendoza, you get him for 2 years. And he fits, I mean, he's not going to run RPO and be Michael Vick for you by any means, but he can move around a little bit and avoid the first guy. And he's as accurate as anybody in the country. If Indiana's offensive line is even in the same stratosphere as what it was this past season, it will not be fun to face Indiana because they run inside zone and outside zone so well. They're going to be in a lot of second down and fives. And then the playbook is so broad with a guy that he was happy to hand off when they were running well, which is rare. But if you give him a little bit of a running game, Indiana's starting to get a few pretty good, again, Tyler Morse coming in from Michigan, etc. They're going to be annoying. How excited do you think Indiana fans are for Fernando Mendoza?
Very, very, very excited. You lose a guy in Curtis Rourke, who I have continued to say on every microphone I can get my hands on, if he didn't get hurt, I think he's sitting in New York for a Heisman Trophy ceremony. I don't think he wins it, but I think he's there. And I think he was good enough to be there, even with the injury. You bring in now a guy in Fernando Mendoza, who I think plays a very similar style. Can he throw the football well? Yeah, he can. He's not going to throw it 75 yards in the air, but he's going to make the right decisions. And I've gone back and watched that game against Auburn because that's the one that everybody wants to highlight because they went on the road to an SEC team and got it done. All they did was just roll out, dump it down 5 yards, roll out, dump it down 5 yards. And they just kept moving the chains and moving the chains and moving the chains. That's how you win big boy football. If your offensive line's not good enough, don't use them. Get away from them. And for whatever reason, an SEC team couldn't figure it out. But he just makes the right decisions. And you're going to have a better offensive line. You've got good running backs that are coming in via the portal, via recruiting, some coming back. You also bring your 2 best receivers back from a year ago, Elijah Surratt and Omar Cooper, on top of some of the guys you bring in from the transfer portal, even a starting tight end from Tennessee. So you've got the weapons offensively. And what's crazy is I think the defense could still be the strength of the team as it was this past season. But Fernando Mendoza is awesome. He's going to be a starter. The quarterback room got really wacky in this offseason because all of a sudden Taven Jackson just said, yep, see you later. I'm going to go to UCF. And everybody was like, well, crap. Now what do you do? It's because Fernando Mendoza steps in the door. And I think Hoosier fans are excited. I think they're expecting similar style of play and type of play and probably type of execution from Mendoza that we saw this past year with Curtis Rourke.
I think that you hit it on the head. And that game against Auburn opened my eyes. I told some people, I'm like, told a buddy of ours who also lives here with you and I'm like, don't be surprised. They've got a quarterback. He's like, yeah. I'm like, okay. I didn't say nothing afterwards, but like, I knew he could play. I just think Indiana is going to be around for a while. It's so important to get a guy like Mendoza, though, because when you add a player of his quality, I mean, he's proven, obviously.
Yeah.
And you get him for multiple years. Now you can develop your own high school kids. And if you bring another poor guy, that whatever, but they have time now and they can sell recruiting. Hey, you're going to play 1 year with Mendoza. But there's so many positives with what they're doing. And for those that don't know, they have 20 guys coming in from the portal as of now. And the spring window is after spring ball. Maybe they probably won't get a whole bunch, but just, maybe it's a place kicker, maybe it's an offensive line, whatever. They're going to add 1 or 2 more pieces. Indiana, tell me how they don't finish in the top 5 or so next year in the Big Ten, because I'm telling you, Mendoza's good. What's the pitch against it? Like, I think they're going to surprise again.
And the schedule's not all that difficult. I mean, and I'll be the first one to tell you that it wasn't overly difficult this past year, and it's not overly difficult again next year. And that says more about the Big Ten than it does Indiana. I mean, you're playing you're in an era right now, the Big Ten, that's extremely top heavy, and the bottom is just really, really bad. But the new teams that
Thank
have
you,
been
Purdue.
added to it, yeah. Thanks, Purdue. We appreciate that.
They're bad.
They're so bad. Even Indiana was obviously really good, but my God, Purdue was bad, and Indiana just embarrassed them. We're having to make up for basketball stuff, so Indiana just took out our frustrations on the football field. I'm with you. I don't see how we're not a top 5 team in the Big Ten. I don't see how we're not flirting and competing with a college football playoff again. Tell me how we couldn't. I think Indiana's roster is better in 25 than it was in 24. I think you upgraded at the spots you needed to upgrade. You bring back almost every key piece, including Aiden Fisher and D'Angelo Pons on the defensive side of the football, all Americans, by the way. The only major change was your quarterback. And I think I'm not going to say you upgraded because I don't fully know yet. We'll see what Mendoza does in the Hoosiers colors, but you got somebody very similar, and I don't think you downgraded by any means. So I have no argument. I think Indiana should be right where they were this past year, if not even better. And then you got to find a way to beat the big dogs like at Ohio State or Notre Dame if you get there.
The only thing that is going to be interesting, and this is why college football is so great, Indiana last year, and it has always been, the hunter. But now they are the hunted. Every team is going to circle Indiana on their schedule.
You're not sneaking up on anybody.
Yeah, you're like the UCLA game. Let's not kid ourselves. You brought that up earlier in the show. They didn't circle it. And when the first quarter was over, they're like, oh.
It's like, wow, crap. Yeah.
Yeah, they were done. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Indiana's in a different spot now. Good for them, but it's just great. And thank you once again, Jacob, for coming on the show today. It's been great. I'll have to have you on again, and I'll be on Locked On Hoosiers again soon too, I'm sure. But thank you to everybody out there for watching the show. Jacob, how can everybody find what you got going on?
Yeah, just search Locked On Hoosiers wherever you get your podcast. However you're listening or watching to the portal, do the same thing for Locked On Hoosiers, a daily podcast on everything Indiana football, basketball, a coaching change possibly. We'll see. Hoosier fans are begging for it on the hardwood. So we'll see if that happens. We'll see if it does. But yeah, you can find us on YouTube or any of your audio podcasting platforms. Just search Locked On Hoosiers.
This has been the portal. You can make sure you can find us too, just like he said. Hit that like button, subscribe, and share this podcast. I will see you again soon.